program. Good to see you.
Nice to be with you, David.
You know, people have interest in you for a couple of reasons.
I can't imagine what that would be.
Let's just get right to the stuff that people want to know about. First of all, are you solvent?
Well, I've had a hell of a year. I've had a good year. I had a miserable year last year, along with everybody else in the real estate industry. But this year has been, as you know, sort of from reading the New York press, a good year for me. And the politicians killed the real estate industry, and we've done great.
Now, see, I don't know what that means when you say the politicians killed the real estate industry. What does that mean?
1986, they passed a tax change, the 1986 law, which really, you look at what happened with Olympia in New York and Reichman and everybody else, and it's big trouble.
They lost incentives. Real estate no longer became a good place to put your dough.
Exactly, and it's coming back strong now. And we've worked hard over the last 6 months, and I think we have really done a job.
Of course, now here in New York City, people may get a warped perception of how things actually are because the New York Daily News and the New York Post, every day, day in, day out, they take stories like you and other popular kind of stories like that, and they just sort of jam it down everyone's throat. Well, now, were you ever near broke?
I was never near broke. I was having a good time, and it was a good year to get a divorce.
Well, let's go back. Let's go back. If you don't mind, what did you have to unload?
Well, I didn't unload. I sold things. I sold the shuttle. And
all right, the shuttle is no longer the Trump shuttle.
I unloaded the wife. I will say... Why did I say that? Tell me, why did I say that?
Yeah.
Although it was a good year to get a divorce.
That ought to cost you a couple extra million right there.
That could have been a very expensive suit. And, but it was a rough year for a lot of people, and I came out really great, and I'm very happy about it. The casinos are doing record business in Atlantic City. We're up, I guess, 75%, and they're just doing record business. And we just got certified on the west side of Manhattan for the largest development in the world, actually, called Riverside South.
How many acres of land do you own over there?
It's 100 acres of land along the Hudson River behind Lincoln Center. And it's really a spectacular piece of land. And for 75 years, people have tried to get that piece of land zoned, and now we're going to do it.
And what kind of things are you going to put over there?
It's going to be residential, it's going to be studios, maybe NBC would be interested. In fact, we talked to them originally about it, and tremendous parkland and waterfront property.
You know what I'd like to see over there?
What?
One of those water parks and maybe a go-kart track.
A lot of people would
water slides and then like a mile-and-a-half go-kart track and stuff. It'd be great. It'd be a lot of fun.
A lot of people would like that.
But again, now I want to come back to this because for the reasons I stated earlier, people are interested, and the New York press kind of magnifies all of this. Were you ever really at a point when you thought, man, I'm down, I'm out, it's nearly tap city for me?
Well, I was at a low point about a year and a half ago. I was really in deep...
You ain't that rich, Don. You can't come on here and say that.
And it was sort of interesting. My wife was suing me for $2.5 billion, okay? And the day that I had the worst day of my life, about a year and a half ago, I had what's called a prenuptial agreement where if all else failed, and unfortunately I disagree with, you know, divorce and everything else, but if it happens, it happens. The worst day of my life, Bad Story Times, front page, Bad Story Wall Street Journal, a year and a half ago. That was the final day that she said, I think I'm going to honor the prenuptial agreement, give me $25 million. And I said, this is no time to be honoring that prenuptial agreement, but I did. And it was sort of an interesting turn of events. But it all worked out well, and, you know, here I am.
I'm not sure I understand that last little thing, but let's go on to something else. H. Ross Perot, what do you think of this guy?
I think he's interesting. I think he's got a real shot. Again, I watch what happened with the real estate industry, done by the politicians to a large extent, and I'm very disappointed in the president for not having stopped it. The economy cannot come back unless the real estate industry comes back, and unless they put the incentives back into real estate. And the politicians are starting to find that. There's a lot of different things happening, and you could see some real movement in that. But I am very disappointed with the administration, what they allowed to happen to this industry. It fuels every other industry.
Okay, but let's get back to the question. H. Ross Perot, is he a legitimate candidate, a viable candidate? Could he step into the bureaucracy of the United States government and make a change, make anything work any better than it works now?
I don't know. I mean, he doesn't know his positions, and frankly, neither do I right now.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to see what happens. I think that he's certainly viable. He's got some great quips and some great color, and it's going to be interesting. I mean, with the Electoral College, anything could happen. You could have the two winners not winning and the third man getting in because it's a democratically control Congress. He's certainly viable. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens. I think he has a chance of winning.
Yeah. Oh, really? You actually do?
I think
Would you vote for the man?
I think the country is so down. I think we're in such a deep depression, and nobody wants to talk about it. The stock market's up. If the stock market went down, then we are officially in a depression in this country. And so many people are disgusted with what's happened. People that own homes, their homes are worth 1/2, they're worth 1/3. You have a nice house, by the way.
Well, thank you very much.
The woman was down there.
But again, would you vote for him? A man knowing what you know of real estate and finance?
I would conceivably vote. I mean, I'd want to see some of his positions. He hasn't made them clear, but I certainly would. I know him. He's a hell of a guy. He's a good guy.
Could you take him in a fight?
I think I could do it.
Speaking of fights, explain to me now what you were thinking about the Mike Tyson situation. Shortly after the verdict was announced that he had been convicted, he was guilty of the crime, you had a plan. Now, what were you thinking
What
there?
was I thinking?
Yeah.
I was thinking that as soon as he gets out, he's going to fight at my casinos.
Yeah, but you can't buy your way through...
Of course, I'm only kidding when I say that, folks.
I wish I could say that.
Mike Tyson was greeted at his door at 1 o'clock in the morning by a woman. He then...
Well, we don't need to go through the case again.
But it's ridiculous. The woman was dancing at 8 o'clock, and this guy's in jail for 6 years. I don't understand it. I think it's wrong. I think
but due process of law prevailed. So
I
then
think
you
he had one of the worst defense lawyers I've ever seen. This was the worst defense. I mean, their defense essentially was that anybody that goes out with Mike Tyson knows she's going to be raped, and therefore Mike Tyson... this is his defense. I think it was a horrible job they did in defending him.
Everything you say may be true, but still in all, you can't come in and say, okay, let's put the decision of the court aside. Here, I have a plan.
I never said that. I
think that was the impression people had of that.
What I said really is that Mike Tyson should fight. Mike Tyson should supply millions and millions and millions of dollars to rape victims, and I think that's a hell of a lot better than him sitting in a jailhouse for 6 years. Now, let him do some time, let him do some this, but this man could supply $30 million just from one fight. And that solves a lot more problems than keeping him locked up in solitary confinement doing nothing. I think that Mike Tyson had a horrible defense. I think
but again, what you're saying is that celebrities maybe should be treated differently than lay people.
And I say Mike should serve some time and everything else. But to keep a man, here's a woman that was dancing at his door at 1 o'clock in the morning dancing.
We don't need to get into this. We don't need to get into this.
But that's an important thing.
Hey, don't get me hot, okay? You know I'm only kidding.
I know.
Hey, good to see you again.
Nice seeing you.
Thank you for your time. Donald Trump, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be right back.
As you know, you're the Fat Cat developer, and you know the book on you is that you throw little old ladies who can't afford the rent out of the apartment.
I don't think that's the book on me, if you want to know that.
Well, certainly
I don't think it is at all. I think probably it's just the opposite. We have very wealthy people in this particular building. We have a building on 100 Central Park South, probably the best piece of real estate in New York and the world. And we have very wealthy people, extremely wealthy people living in this building.
Well,
we have second homes.
It's not quite accurate to say that every occupant is an extremely wealthy person.
No, but the ones that were complaining were the wealthy ones. The ones that were complaining, Phil, were the wealthy ones. These are people with a lot of money. One of them owns a brownstone, a number of brownstones on East 66th Street, and yet she's living in this building for a rent-controlled rent. The rent-controlled people, the people that need rent control, they're not the ones that are protected. It's people that are usually wealthy with a lot of influence that have the connections to get a rent-control apartment. People that might need it, they don't have rent-control apartments.
Well, that's a little facile. I mean, it's a little bit like saying, you know, those people are out of work because they're lazy.
No, it's
I think it may be. Well, first of all, let's the building on Central Park South has been settled. You own it, and you've made your deal with all the residents.
We're very happy with it.
Score one for you.
Very happy with that.
Back to this this lawsuit. So you hire Roy Cohn, and he goes to work, and you win it. Cohn doesn't like lawyers either because they always want to settle, and you don't like that about lawyers. The idea of settling drove me crazy. The fact was that we did rent to blacks in our buildings. What we didn't do was rent to welfare cases, white or black. I watched what happened when the government came after Samuel Lafrac, another builder, and he caved in and started taking welfare cases. They virtually ruined his buildings. Welfare cases ruined his buildings. Isn't that... Aren't you pretty close here to looking like an insensitive guy from atop your Trump Tower looking down on the Woolman Rink over the vast holdings of your own empire? Shouldn't we have just a little more understanding from a man of your influence and wealth on the issue of making New York livable for all of us, safety on the subway? If the answer is absolutely, then we can't continue to give you guys these big tax breaks, and that would go for General Electric and NBC too. You tell us in your own book that you would make money on the Trump Tower in New York,
but when everybody else
without the tax breaks.
So when everybody else in the city gets it but Donald Trump, when Koch and the administration tries to stop Donald Trump, and I don't say give me the tax breaks, I say don't give everyone else the tax breaks. If every other building being built in New York City is entitled to a residential tax abatement, and Trump Tower goes, and I'm not entitled, I'm the only building in the city of New York that's not entitled, I don't think that's appropriate.
Look at the location of your building.
What difference does it make? There are other wonderful locations. Phil, there are other wonderful locations also that are also getting tax abatements. I won the case. They didn't give it to me. It took me 2.5 years in court. I won it 7-0 in 3 different courts, and I'm very happy about it. I didn't win it because I so much needed it as much as because on a moral principle I was entitled to it. If nobody's going to get it, I'm satisfied. If everybody's going to get it, I shouldn't be the only one that's not getting it, Phil. And I know you well enough to know that you wouldn't take it either. If you were in my position, you wouldn't take that. So that's what happened.
Hey, let's hear it for the rich folks. But you tell us also in your book, you left Queens and you left Brooklyn for Manhattan to get away from rent control. You're honest to tell us in this book.
No, I'm honest. Hey, I'm not running for anything, Phil. I'm not running for office. I don't have to lie in a book. I want to tell the facts, okay? Rent, I mean, do you want me to say little fibs and little this and little that and how much we all love rent control and what a great thing it's been for New York? It's been a disaster for New York. It's badly hurt New York. It's crippled New York. It's made it impossible for a lot of people to live in New York. And you see what's happening. You look at the Bronx. You look at certain parts of Queens and Brooklyn. You see what rent control's done. And I think you know it as well as anybody else. Rent control, and I'm one of the few developers in the world that would ever say it, some forms of rent control are sometimes necessary to protect the elderly, to protect people that truly don't have the money. But when you have multimillionaires, and not all instances of this, Phil, there's not all instances, but you go to Manhattan, the prime sections of Manhattan, where you have rent control and rent stabilization all over. Those are wealthy people in many instances, and I don't mean in every instance, Phil, but I mean in many, and I would say in a majority. You have multi-millionaires in some cases living in apartments for $200, $300, and $500 a month that should be paying many times. This is going to sound a little unusual, but New York rents can be $10,000 and $20,000 a month. What does that mean? What does that mean, Phil? That means that the city can't tax because if a wealthy person's paying $300 a month, you can't really tax that beyond a certain point, 20% of that or whatever it might be. So the city's always short of funds. It's a joke what's happened. And the people that need rent control, and there are some indeed, those aren't the people that have it. It's the people with the connections. Somebody knows Trump. Somebody knows somebody else. They call up. They say, do me a favor. That's what it's all about.
This audience wants to get in here. Mr. Trump, sir, if your position is, let's grant a given. No doubt about it. Under rent control circumstances, there are going to be certain people who don't need it who get it. Not unlike Social Security. There are going to be some people who get it who don't need it. But to suggest that rent control is somehow being pervasively abused throughout the island of Manhattan by people who don't need it, I do have plenty of doubt.
Well, you ought to check the numbers, Phil. I mean, I can tell you something. Now, one little thing. All I'm asking for is a simple thing. Give a means test. If a person makes $150,000 a year working in a big advertising agency, if a person makes $200,000, $300,000, $100,000, $75,000 a year, let there be a means test so that that person will give the apartment to somebody that can afford it if you have to do that, Phil. Why can't there be a means test? Well, why should multimillionaires live for $300 or $400 a month when poor people are paying more than that and have to pay more?
And how many people would have to work in the office to determine whether or not people are of means or not of means? And would you build the building? It'd be a very large one, occupied by thousands of bureaucrats trying to figure out who does and who doesn't.
You wouldn't.
It isn't that simple. Just to, and what
you
about
know the kind of money you're talking about? If you emptied and made available to people that need really this protection, the apartments occupied by very wealthy people. In New York, you're talking about tremendous amounts of money. And I mean, if you're talking about a number of accountants in order to administrate a program, you're not talking about a lot relative to what we're talking.
You should not have called Mayor Koch a moron. That was not good public relations.
Hey, What can I do?
Well, aren't you a little, don't you want to take this
I don't
back
think
at
it's
all?
bad public relations. No, I don't take it back. When it comes to running the city, he's about as bad as anybody I've seen. Ed Koch has been a disaster for New York. People that live in New York understand it. Taxes have gone through the roof. Everything's gone through. You have, whether it's a Wallman rink or a subway system, whether it's a school that comes in, it takes 8 or 9 years.
Excuse me, but here you're out with your folks at City Hall getting your picture taken. Was it the good old days?
Well, I guess he liked me in those days.
No, I just think that, and this is, and I don't think you have to be passionately committed to City Hall or anybody to conclude that this kind of language from someone of your power and influence is not good style.
Phil, from my standpoint, it doesn't really matter. Again, I'm not running for office. If the point is made better by saying that, let the point be made. He's done a lousy job as the mayor. Anybody from New York probably understands it and knows it. It's gone down now, and it's going down as the most corrupt. Hey, Phil, this is the most corrupt administration in the history of the city.
They have their problem.
I happen to agree with your assessment of Mayor Koch in New York City. What do you think will finally have to happen to bring his downfall?
Well, I have a feeling, and maybe it's more of a prediction. I think that the incompetence and corruption of the Koch administration will eventually lead to his resignation or his just having to be forced out, because I think he's that bad. And as Phil says, I don't like mincing words, because what difference does it make? Again, I'm not running for office, so it doesn't matter. I can stand up here, and unlike a lot of people that I watch, I can say what I think. But that's much of a prediction. I believe that the incompetence and corruption will ultimately lead to his having to get out. When I see a total ripoff of this country by Japan, where they literally have no defense budget, where we have to borrow money from them in order to get them oil and defend the Persian Gulf, where most of the oil goes to Japan and other countries, not us. We get 4% of our oil. When I see Kuwait, a total ripoff, we're bringing the Bridgeton. You remember the Bridgeton? Their oil minister sat back and he laughed at how much money he's going to make. Why aren't we getting some of that money? Why aren't we getting it? They're taking in billions and billions of dollars, and we can't even land a helicopter on Kuwaiti soil. You tell me that's right. Saudi Arabia, they wouldn't even be there except for us. And in Saudi Arabia, we couldn't even use their minesweepers, Phil. You know it. We said, could we use your minesweepers? Ours are old, outdated, not worth a damn. They said, no, you can't use our minesweepers to protect the Persian Gulf. I mean, it's a disgrace. What's going on?
On his enemies. If people screw me, I screw back in spades.
I mean, is there something wrong with that? Tell me. Phil, is there something wrong with that?
Well, a confrontational kind of I'll get you used.
You keep saying you're not running for office, but why don't you run for mayor of New York?
No, I wouldn't want to run for mayor of New York. I'd like to see somebody talented do that, and there's a tremendous potential in New York. New York is the great city. It's one of the great places of the world, but I really have no intention of running for mayor. Thank you.
But you definitely are a political person, whether you run for office, by what everything that you say and do points in that direction.
Trying to scrape up a down payment for a little fixer-upper in your neighborhood? Take a look at my next guest. There's a report around Wall Street that this is what he has in mind. This is Donald Trump, 33 years old, and some people think that he wants to buy the World Trade Center, the 110-story Manhattan skyscraper that anyone can pick up if they've got the coins. Donald Trump, as I say, is just 33 years old. He took his father's rather modest by current standards real estate empire in Brooklyn and expanded it considerably. He now has an apartment for sale in a new Trump building called the Trump Tower going up on 5th Avenue. There it is. You can buy this apartment, one floor of it, one whole floor of that building, that is, $11 million altogether. You bought some prized properties at the bottom of the New York market in the 1970s. Inner cities have been pure gold since that time. Why? Because replacement costs have just gone up so much?
Well, no, not really. I had a great faith in New York. Primarily, our purchases have been in New York, and about 5 years ago, New York was not considered very hot, and cities in general weren't considered too hot. And we purchased the old Commodore Hotel, and we've reconverted that now into about $110 million Grand Hyatt Hotel, which is opening up next week in New York City. And we've made some other purchases that have been fine.
Is that your general advice to people who are interested in real estate investment, though? Look to the inner cities, look to old buildings and doing something with them?
Well, I like the inner cities. I see the inner cities as being sort of a wave of the future now. I think with the problems of fuel and the gasoline shortages and everything else, and the transportation, especially in the major cities such as New York and Los Angeles and Chicago, I see the inner cities as being probably, in terms of a real estate or in a real estate sense, probably the most viable investments.
But it's going to be expensive. Apartments in New York City alone, one bedroom, not very large at all, $650 a month. That's tough for the working class, isn't it?
And that's actually now a very low price. In fact, if you have any of them available, I'd like to maybe...
I know where I can sell 1,000 of them at that price.
Right.
Actually, that is a low
That's
price.
Right. That's really a very low price now. I know of a couple of buildings, for instance, an Olympic Tower, which is on 51st Street and 5th Avenue. Apartments are being rented by the condominium owners for $5,000 and $6,000 a month, and they're one-bedroom and two-bedroom apartments. So it's, when you say $600, even in other sections, it's almost becoming a low price.
What happens to some of the old buildings in the inner cities that are works of art? You were recently the object of a lot of controversy because you destroyed some sculptures on a building that you bought that the Metropolitan Art Museum wanted. Why did you have those destroyed, first of all, and what happens to the look of a city?
Well, what we had is we purchased a site with an old department store on it, the old Bonwit Teller store on 5th Avenue and 57th Street next to Tiffany, and we had to really take the building down. And there were many people that didn't want us to take it down. They wanted to try and preserve the building. But the building really was not worth, as an art building or an Art Deco building, it really was not worth very much. And we did take it down, and there was somewhat of an outcry, but I think that's generally subsided now, and I think people like what we're doing and like the building that we're putting in its place.
But couldn't you have saved just those sculptures that you had broken?
Well, it would have been very, very dangerous to have saved them. They weighed 2 tons, they were 15 feet high, they were about 2.5 feet thick, and if they would have fallen, they could have fallen the opposite way. If they fall into the building, you don't worry. If they fall out toward 5th Avenue, people could have been very badly hurt and killed, and to me, it was not worth it. And they've really proven not to be very valuable art structures right now, and we've had appraisals done. In fact, even after the fact, we've had appraisals done, and they've turned out not to be very valuable.
Mr. Trump, what's left in your life? You're 33 years old. You're worth all this money. You say you didn't say that you want to be worth $1 billion.
No, I really don't. I just want to keep busy and keep active and be interested in what I do, and that's all there is to life as far as I'm concerned. I really am not looking to make tremendous amounts of money. I'm looking to enjoy my life, and if that happens to go with it, that's fabulous.
Give me one final bottom line. In 5 years, the price of a hotel room in New York City will go for?
It could be $1,000 a night.
Start saving your money, folks. Just one night, $1,000.
For some people, the ultimate goal in life has been becoming the President of the United States. Would you like to be the President of the United States?
I really don't believe I would, Rona, but I would like to see somebody as the President who could do the job, and there are very capable people in this country.
Most people who are capable are not running for office. Most men are frightened of politics today.
It is a shame, isn't it?
Yes.
It is a shame. The most capable people are not necessarily running for political office, and that is a very sad commentary on the country. They had major corporations and they had this and that, but they are not running for political office.
Why wouldn't someone like yourself run for political office? You have all the money that you possibly need. You've accomplished a great deal, even though you are only 34. I know there's a lot of things that you possibly can do in the years ahead. Why wouldn't you dedicate yourself to public service?
Because I think it's a very mean life. I would love and I would dedicate my life to this country, but I see it as being a mean life, and I also see it as somebody with strong views and somebody with the kind of views that are maybe a little bit unpopular, which may be right, but may be unpopular, wouldn't necessarily have a chance of getting elected against somebody with no great brain but a big smile. And that's a sad commentary for the political process.
Television, in a strange way, has ruined that process, hasn't it?
It's hurt the process very much. I mean, the Abraham Lincolns of the world. Abraham Lincoln would probably not be electable today because of television. He was not a handsome man, and he did not...
You took out a full-page ad in major U.S. newspapers last year criticizing U.S. foreign policy. What would you do differently, Donald?
I'd make our allies, forgetting about the enemies you can't talk to so easily, I'd make our allies pay their fair share. We're a debtor nation. Something's going to happen over the next number of years with this country, because you can't keep going on losing $200 billion, and yet we let Japan come in and dump everything right into our markets and everything. It's not free trade. If you ever go to Japan right now and try to sell something, forget about it, Oprah. Just forget about it. It's almost impossible. They don't have laws against it. They just make it impossible. They come over here, they sell their cars, their VCRs, they knock the hell out of our companies. And, hey, I have tremendous respect for the Japanese people. I mean, you can respect somebody that's beating the hell out of you, but they are beating the hell out of this country. Kuwait, they live like kings. The poorest person in Kuwait, they live like kings. And yet they're not paying. We make it possible for them to sell their oil. Why aren't they paying us 25% of what they're making? It's a joke.
This sounds like political presidential talk to me, and I know people have talked to you about whether or not you want to run. Would you ever?
Probably not. But I do get tired of seeing the country ripped off.
Why would you not?
I just don't think I really have the inclination to do it. I love what I'm doing. I really like it.
Also, it doesn't pay as well.
No, it doesn't. But, you know, I just probably wouldn't do it, Oprah. I probably wouldn't, but I do get tired of seeing what's happening with this country. And if it got so bad, I would never want to rule it out totally, because I really am tired of seeing what's happening with this country, how we're really making other people live like kings, and we're not.
What do you think of this year's presidential race, the way it's shaping up?
Well, it's going to be very interesting. I think that probably George Bush has an advantage in terms of the election. I think that probably people would say that he's got like that little edge in terms of the incumbency, et cetera, et cetera. But I think Jesse Jackson's done himself very proud. I think Michael Dukakis has done one hell of a job. And George Bush has done a hell of a job. You know, they all went in there sort of as semi-underdogs, including George Bush, and they've all come out. I think people that are around all three of those candidates can be very proud of the jobs they've done.
You've said, though, that if you did run for president, you believe you'd win.
Well, I don't know. I think I'd win. I tell you what, I wouldn't go in to lose. I've never gone in to lose in my life. And if I did decide to do it, I think I'd be inclined, I would say that I would have a hell of a chance of winning, because I think people, I don't know how your audience feels, but I think people are tired of seeing the United States ripped off. And I can't promise you everything, but I can tell you one thing, this country would make one hell of a lot of money from those people that for 25 years have taken advantage. It wouldn't be the way it's been.